Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Christopher Satoor. He is a philosopher, and his scholarship is presently devoted to German idealism, and specifically to Schelling, Friedrich Schelling, about whom he is currently writing a doctoral dissertation. He is active on social media, on Twitter, and more recently on YouTube as well. I provide the links below in the descriptions of the descriptions for this video. What fascinates me about Christopher, is your form of presentation, a style that is at the same time very personal and very intimate and scholarly, because I think most people find it easier to go in either of those two directions. They either make it too personal, insist on a personal stance and sacrifice the scholarly side, commitments, or they go in a scholarly direction and forget about the personal side, that the possibility and maybe the necessity of making things personally relevant. So I'm really excited to speak with you. This is our first conversation and record it. Hopefully it will go smoothly.
and I thank you for having me here. This is wonderful.
My pleasure. So let's begin with maybe some personal notes, your personal history, your academic history, how you found your way into German idealism, what was happening before, and how Schelling, how you became so committed to Schelling scholarship.
Well, that's a long story, actually. I wasn't a very good student in high school, actually, believe it or not. And I found a lot of the courses in high school I had no interest in. And my role model at the time was my grandfather. My grandfather had immigrated into Canada from Iran, and he was an English teacher. And his whole idea was to start a whole new program of ESL, English for new Canadians, because he felt the program was terrible. And I always thought, I wanted to be a teacher because of this model from my grandfather. But I just, history wasn't my thing at the time. I liked poetry a lot. So, but I was kind of lost after high school, and I'm open about this very much so. And finally, I got pushed into a college program, a general arts and science program. And I found an essay that moved me more than anything I've ever read. And it was Immanuel Kant's What is Enlightenment? And there's this question that Kant asks. He says, sapere ude in Latin, dare to know. And this blew me away. Dare to know, have the courage to use your own reason. And I just thought to myself, wow, what does that mean? What does it mean to dare someone to know? What does it mean to have the courage to learn and to grapple with growing as an individual? And from that moment on, it was Immanuel Kant. So I was reading Kant and Hegel before I even entered in university, and I was deeply inspired by both of them. And when I got to the university, I found myself a little disheartened with the university model, because a lot of the philosophy we were learning was more analytic, Anglo-American philosophy. We weren't learning the philosophers from the continent, continentalists. So I would find professors and we would do directed readings, and we formed a group of students, and we started reading Kant and Fichte and Hegel, and I was really inspired by these thinkers. And then I began immersing myself in existentialism, so Nietzsche and Heidegger and Merleau-Ponty, phenomenology. And when I finished my undergraduate, I didn't know what I was going to do. So I started taking odd jobs at the university. I was working in the bookstore, and then I was also helping in science departments, putting science kits together. I didn't want to leave the university. I needed to stay in that bubble, that comfort zone of the university, so I could have the library. And I would go on my breaks to the library and just open up books. I got accepted to a master's program in humanities because I wanted an interdisciplinary study. I wanted to think about cosmology, ontology, so the study of being, and theology in a philosophical sense. So I'm not a religious person, but I will read texts that had this kind of import to it. So after this period, I started reading more contemporary works like Gilles Deleuze and Alain Badiou and Zizek, and I liked their works, but something was missing. Something was still missing from their works, because as I find their work brilliant, and I think politics is a great issue that everyone should slowly get into. However, I felt that a lot of the issues that they were dealing with was they were deconstructing things, but not putting any ideas forward. And I thought we need something to create new ideas and grapple with the problems that are going on in our world. And then I met my mentor, who is, her name is Joan Steigerwald, and she's a scholar of Kant and Schelling. And the first time I read Schelling, something happened. It was like a hand reached out of the text and shook. I had never, ever read someone. And now Schelling writes in a very poetic way, but at the same time, he captivates you and draws you into the text. And that was it. I started reading everything by him, and I started buying every secondary source I could, used copies on Amazon, and just buying all of these, everything I could on German idealism. And I was reading and reading and reading, and COVID hit. And so when COVID hit, I had all these books, and what am I supposed to do with all these books? I didn't really feel motivated to write my dissertation. So I started reading these books, and I thought, let's share this knowledge with people. And so I started writing small reviews of each book that I read on my Twitter account. And it made me sad that, in German idealist scholarship, Kant and Hegel are the only people that, I really stress the most. And no one really reads Schelling. And I think there's so much to learn from Schelling, especially in an age where we have climate issues. Schelling has a philosophy of nature. Schelling gets rid of the subject-object binary. And I think that a lot of our problems with race and a lot of our problems within the world is because we view others as objects. And I think if we looked at this polemic of the subject-object binary, that we could get rid of a lot of these things. And that's it. He captivated me. His system drew me forward. And the later Schelling deals with the philosophy of existence, with ourselves, with being, and what it means to be a responsible individual with decisions, and how decisions in the real world affect us. They cause dread, they cause angst, they cause lots of things. And he just seemed like he had a very sad life, and ups and downs, and just like any other ordinary individual. And this inspired me that he's not up in the ivory tower. He's just an ordinary, average individual writing these fantastic texts. And that's pretty much the story.
So the way, that particular way in which Schelling's philosophy fit into his personal life, that also was significant. Is that right?
Yeah, it really was. Like, I think every individual, when they leave high school and they leave university, they're a little bit lost. They're a little bit, they don't know what they're going to do next, or sometimes they're excited. And Schelling, and even in his, it's called the Yearbook in German, but his diary, he's very expressive about this, that he was nervous about going to other universities, teaching about, writing and releasing. Like, the last published text he had was the 1809 Freedom Essay, and he didn't publish anything else. And he still was teaching. And he also went on archaeological digs, which nobody really knows about. And he was hired by the Bavarian king, Maximilian II, along with Johann Wagner, to go to Venice and go to Italy and dig up these, go on these archaeological digs, because he was so entrenched with this historical, these historical ideas, and he really felt that both mythology and history fill in the content of our consciousness. They're always with us, and so he just totally inspired me. So,
you talked about when you were talking about your encounter with analytic philosophy and later contemporary philosophers like Zizek and Badiou, Deleuze. I found it very interesting that as you were describing, once something didn't resonate with you as much, you felt free to drop it or to distance yourself from it. And I think that
Yes.
that's something that we don't always allow, or not all of us, we don't allow ourselves. Oh, hello. Yeah, my
Sorry
cat.
about that.
No, my own cat is surprisingly quiet, but he also likes to give lectures during my video recordings. Uh, but I found that I find it useful. I wonder if you agree with this, that this decision to set aside things that don't resonate as much. We don't find ourselves to be moved by them as powerfully, because that opens a space for the discovery of a philosopher that would move us. And do you think that that was an important step to keep that space available for German idealism?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So even in my early undergraduate, I mean, I love the Kantian and Hegelian texts, but I also wanted to read everything. I wanted to read Kierkegaard and Nietzsche and everything. And yes, and I'm the kind of person that I really like getting absorbed in texts. A professor of mine and a friend of mine told me this once, and it stuck with me forever. When you read a text, it's not just a book. You're having a conversation with someone, you know, long gone past, or it could be a new author, but you're having a conversation with that author. And when you continue to read the text, you're getting more out of it. And I find when I drop a philosopher, it's not because I'm leaving them behind and I'm done. It's because I've learned from them, and I think that I want to move forward and maybe take some of that with me, but also leave it behind. So the one aspect of leaving Deleuze and Badiou behind, what I've taken from them is that real thought has to be creative. So creative ideas have to emerge spontaneously from the author or artist. So that I've taken in from both Badiou and Deleuze. But there was something also missing. There was something of the subjective that was missing. There was something of the universal and the absolute that was missing from their work. But yes, so I don't have a problem of dropping a text and moving on. For me, there's this great line from, I'm sorry to keep name dropping, but there's this one line from Augustine's Against the Confessions. And Augustine's asked, what is truth? And he says, truth is never grasped. It's never tangible here in the moment, because truth is the mission. It's the journey. And I like that. I like this idea that truth is the pursuit of knowledge, the pursuit of all of this philosophical knowledge. And I still hold that. I still hold that as a degree. So as on a pedestal, sorry. And I really believe that we're on these kind of philosophical journeys or political journeys or religious journeys or, artistic. And that's how I see it. And I see that, it's like the canvas is empty and you're painting this canvas with all these colors when you're reading each text, and each text gives you a specific color, and you can move on and add new colors. That's how I see it in a sense.
That line was from Augustine's Against the Academicians. Is that the work?
Yes.
Okay. I should read that one. Now I'm gonna indulge in name dropping because it relates to something you said, and I want to see if we can confirm this together. I agree. James Hillman, the psychologist, American psychologist, who was a student of Carl Jung, he said that one of the reasons we read is to find out which tree we are on, which intellectual tree we are on. And he said that, I read people like Aquinas and Descartes, and they don't do anything for me. But then he reads people like Jung and maybe some of the German idealists, and he kind of feels like he belongs to those. He's a branch on that tree, you might find that people like Spinoza speak to me, Spinoza and Leibniz, and then Schelling, because they are in dialogue with each other. So it is never about just a philosopher, and it also has that element of contingency. That's something that a philosopher does for one person cannot be done for somebody else. So that kind of journey of discovering similar to how we find ourselves in our biological family. but there's also the journey of finding our intellectual family, the people that we feel comfortable and we feel nourished by them. We feel like when you're
Yes.
reading, feel inspired and nourished. And it's an exciting journey of finding that. I have that kind of relationship with people like Hillman and Jung. And sometimes it's a complex relationship. It's not total admiration and agreement, but it is that I would describe it as nourishment and belonging.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important for thinkers and people that are studying to find their own canon. Like you don't just follow the canon that's given to you and regurgitate these ideas. You really got to find thinkers that resonate with you. I really like what you said there. They're kind of like your biological family, because you not only resonate with them, but ideas stick out to you and they're familiar with you. And so for me, yes, not so much Spinoza, but like Leibniz and Schelling, of course, a little bit of Heidegger. Also Meister Eckhart, a lot of these thinkers, this canon has become my own kind of canon that I like talking about these thinkers. And I'm familiar with Hillman, actually. I'm familiar, a friend of mine named Matthew Siegel, who's on Twitter as well, he's been, trying to get me to read some other thinkers like Gebser and Hillman and some other thinkers. And I'm in constant dialogue with him as well too. So yeah, that's great. That's fascinating that you like Jung as well too.
Yeah, relatively new. I was unfortunately I spent too many years in natural science of psychology, cognitive neuroscience, and stuff like that, which was kind of like the analytic philosophy of psychology.
Yeah,
and it's very comfortable. It's very neat, and it's almost too professional. It's like it's a job, and it's very impersonal. And in my view, at least it can be. So this is a question in general about the activity of reading a philosophical text. What happens when we read a philosophical text, especially when it's working? And how is that different from reading a novel or reading a work of, a work of science? How would you to introduce that to people who are not as well versed in what happens they're not as familiar with what should happen when they're reading philosophy?
there's something there's something profound about something that Descartes says in in How to Read a Text in his Problems of Philosophy. He states the first time you read a philosophical text, by the way, I tell all my students this too, because I'm a teacher's assistant as well. I tell all my students this, that when you first open a text, read it like a novel, read it through, read the pages through, get used to the text, get used to the words and the language. The second time, start underlining. Don't be afraid to underline, highlight, add, write notes and get used to some of the bigger words that you don't know. And it's fine if you don't know a word, look it up. Like have a dictionary near you. These are the tools that we as thinkers and artists and philosophers and scientists should be working with all the time. And the third time, read it like kind of like a detective novel, like almost like a film noir. You're looking for the question. What is the question they're asking? And how does this question apply to the problem that they're trying to get at? Is the problem existence? Is the problem about knowing, in the sense of like Kant? Is the problem about freedom or some kind of practical element? And so I find when I present the text like that, a lot of people resonate with it. A lot of people like that idea. And it is in that sense. You're having a dialogue. You're an interlocutor with somebody else. And for me, as a philosopher, I don't see science and then philosophy and then art. I see all three of them combined. We need all of them. And I strongly believe that metaphysicians and physicists, theoretical physicists, should be working together, throwing out concepts. And someone like Lee Smolin is a good example of that. He works with Peter Unger on who's a philosopher and a political thinker, and he's a theoretical physicist, and they come together. And this coming together is so amazing. It reminds me of like the romantic sim philosophy. Sorry, I'm going off on tangents. But yes, so it's all about knowing problems and questions and how those are answered. And these are something that we don't have anymore in the university. Like a lot of youth, I think, that get apathetic towards material that they're learning, or anybody, it's because we're not trained to really get acquainted with questions and what is a problem and how can we solve this. And that's the beauty of philosophy. That's the, sorry, my cat.
No,
That's
no.
the beauty of philosophy, of these things, of dealing with questions and problems, because that's what life is. Life is, it is dealing with, the average everyday questions and how we apply those and our problems and how we can solve these things.
Yeah, yeah. I really like that you pointed out how reading is not one thing. It can come in multiple stages. So it doesn't really make sense when we say, I've read that book, or I've finished reading that book, because especially when we have read a book, we know that there are so many reasons to go back to it, and it can be revisited,
Yes.
reread. It's only for me, when I think naively, when I think as a novice, I feel like, oh, that's a book I haven't read, and I can just go and read it and be done with it. But that's not really, as you said, that's not how it works. I'm hesitant to ask you that, but I kind of want to ask you about your discontent with analytic philosophy. What is it that you said that something was missing from it? But I think it's helpful to pause a little bit on what is missing. You talked about the contemporary continental philosophy. You said that maybe it is a little bit too political. It's too maybe deconstructive, deconstructionistic. But what about the mainstream, so-called mainstream analytic philosophy?
Well, I'm gonna get in trouble for this.
That's okay.
It's not that I'm against analytic philosophy. A lot of it's helpful. I like a lot of analytic thinkers. I like Jonathan Bennett. I like Donald Davidson. There's something about this. I'm someone that believes that, life, that philosophy should be working for life and not the other way around. And I find analytic philosophy, even in the great, coming out of the Vienna Circle, as so-called the handmaiden of the sciences, has already lowered itself down in a sense that it's not going to be working with science. It's going to be dealing with propositions and verification theory and falsifying specific things. And I really don't like this idea that, the Aristotelian logic, all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. All we're doing is taking a predicate and we're, flipping it around, or we're affirming or denying the consequent or the antecedent, or we're saying, is the famous Bertrand Russell line, is the King of France bald? There not being a King of France. I find that it detaches us from the world. I really think so. I mean, there is something about a philosophy of language that's important. And I think there's aspects of the philosophy of mind that's important, like J.C.C. Smart's debates with Searle and Kripke about whether the mental states are brain states, or I think this is useful. But when it comes down to just verifying logic or logical terms, I find that this detaches us away from what we should be dealing with. That philosophy should be kind of existential. And I don't mean like existentialism. I mean, it should be dealing with life. It should be dealing with us individuals, even animals and plant life as well too. So that was my one. And I really am a kind of metaphysician. I love metaphysics, and I feel that metaphysics is looked down upon by analytic philosophers. So it's looked down upon. They're more interested in epistemology, but you can't have one without the other. You need both epistemology, what can we know, and metaphysics, because there is knowledge that we can't see, but we need to philosophize about. I mean, like, there's theoretical physicists talking about dark matter and molecules and cells that we can't even see, and yet we're doing experiments in CERN and throwing things together and smashing them together to see, and we're trying to theorize about these. So for me, it lacked this existential character. It lacked the spiritual essence. It wasn't philosophy to me. And there are people, I have analytic friends that love analytic philosophy, and they love this They love the style, how clear it is.
Mhm.
But you you don't really learn anything about the author. You don't really learn anything. I mean, the great thing about Donald Davidson is that you learn about his life. Like he's sitting at his table drinking coffee and wondering about, what's going on, or
Right.
in regards to causal events. And so things like that,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
I find
True,
very
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. There's this discussion. You probably have heard this. There's a discussion between Richard Rorty, and Donald Davidson, where Davidson says he's, I think, talking about his work on truth and theory of truth and what makes statements true. And he said that, I don't feel, I'm not interested in justifying why this is a worthwhile project. We need a theory. My position is that I need this. I need this
Yes.
theory. And I think that is having that in the foreground is an important aspect of keeping the connection. I find your description very relatable. I remember when I was a PhD student, uh, I was interacting with some of my mentors, and I was always very shocked when when we would leave the formal setting of a university and we would go to maybe a pub or a restaurant. I was always taken aback when my mentors would be totally uninterested in talking about the subject matter, or what we were working on as our work. They would be interested in just exclusively in things like food, like hockey, baseball. And I was like, so what did we do there? So the idea of the work being isolated from the rest of life, and maybe for some people that is the point, to keep it like playing chess,
Yep.
to keep it insulated, and not let it affect the rest of one's life, because it can get really messy.
Right.
We can fixate on a problem and sacrifice some of our other the domains of our personal life for the sake of philosophy. Yeah.
Yeah. It like for me, it's not just a matter of leaving. It's not just a matter of leaving philosophy, you know, at my desk and then go like right now. I'm at my sister's farm. My sister
Mm.
has a 200-year-old, you know, century-old schoolhouse that she's kind of refurbished and rebuilt. And I'm with my nieces, and I'm with animals all over the place. But even when I've finished reading something or writing, and I go downstairs and I'm integrated with everybody, I'm still thinking. I'm still thinking about specific things. I'm still engaging um, in issues that are going around, philosophical issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't really leave that. That's the that's the tragedy of philosophy, I guess. You're kind of thrown into this space, and you never get out of you never
Mm-hmm.
get out of it, in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm fine with that, because I'm the kind of person that not only just lives in my head, but I have to be thinking all the time. I have to be engaging in something.
I think that is the prerequisite for doing what you do, and to be able to do it this way. When I watch a YouTube video by you, I really like. I don't know much about German idealism, but I'm interested because I see a person there who is alive, and the material is alive for him, and he's really working through it. He's working through problems, and he's presenting something, and there is a real and true motive for doing this.
Yeah.
Um,
Thank you very
so
much.
I really appreciate that. And I think it is rare. Not there are people who are doing it, but relatively speaking, in proportion, in relation to, as you said, the scripted form of content creation, playing the game of YouTube as opposed to using YouTube
Yeah.
to do something that.
And I like I don't want to make any money from that YouTube channel. That channel is knowledge, it's education, and I want it out there for everybody. When I teach, when I'm like, even just as a TA, I have this code. I never present my bias to anybody. Like if I'm there to teach Descartes, I'm there to teach Descartes. I'm not going to say I think Descartes this or that.
Right.
My political views, my religious views, any of that never comes across. I think that's a crossing the line with both the audience and students and their learning, getting involved with their own learning. Their learning should be dealing with this text. And I realized that a lot of students aren't reading the texts. And so I would spend my 2-hour tutorials reading with them, getting them to read in their own voice. and dealing with the text, and it shocked them. And so I would relate the text to a movie that they'd seen, and they were like, whoa, wow. And it slowly in their own voice, as they were reading these texts, they started caring, they started seeing these things. And I realized that, yeah, YouTube videos are fantastic to watch. I love watching YouTube videos on philosophy videos at nighttime before I go to sleep. But sometimes I want to watch a biography on a philosopher, or sometimes I want them to deal with a question, and I don't want to see like visuals or, funny things. Sometimes I try to be humorous, but I don't think I'm very funny. So like I'll make like shots at my grandfather clock, what I think is funny, but it's probably not funny or something like that. But yeah, I want them to realize that there's no ego here. I'm learning too as I'm teaching, and from their comments as well too, if there's any comments. And I want them to struggle along with me. I want that to come out from the video. And that's what I've been trying to do.
I think there are funny moments, but I wouldn't say funny, I would say charming. For example, what you do with, it happens when I'm recording videos, sometimes I make a mistake, and it really matters what we do, how we react. And the way you react to your mistakes is like very, very understanding, very like, oh yeah, this happened, it's funny, yeah, let's keep it, let's keep it there. So that also brings us to this reality of your presentation, that you don't prepare, you are essentially showing your work, and you just turn on the camera. So what is that process? Do you have like guiding principles for doing YouTube, or is it just remaining grounded in what you're already doing and then just adding YouTube to it?
See, I'm an auditory learner, so I like hearing things. So even when I'm reading, I read out loud. And when I do a YouTube video, there's a certain thing that I want to present. So I want to present a specific idea. So the only video that I've ever written down something full was when I think it's my third video. I outlined the entire freedom essay. And the reason why I wrote it down is because I didn't want to go off on tangents. So I wanted to make specific points. But like the fourth video that I do on the religious ideas in the freedom essay.
Right, the biblical themes, right.
Yeah, which are difficult themes, they're biblical themes. I wanted to present them and I wanted to go through. But if they're just written down and I'm just very mechanical, it's not going to come across. The message is not going to come across. The poetic element of Schelling is not going to be, it's not going to be there. Like when you read Hegel, and he's a dialectical thinker, you need those two positions all the time. You need to be engaging with these oppositions to understand Hegel's movement and thinking. With Schelling, it's the poetic element. You need to see these problems spring before you. He says, he uses the word Ursprung in German, which means like that. Right there, project right there. It's like a primordial jumping or leaping in front of you. So that's how I wanted to do it. And then sometimes it was kind of just ad-libbing. Sometimes it was just kind of, I'm just going to go with the flow. I'm going to record this, and I'm going to talk about this. So I did that with his biography. Before I left Toronto to come over for the holidays, I decided I was going to give a full biography on his life, because there was none of that ever on YouTube. And I thought his life was worth knowing about, because there are so many ups and downs, and he was all over the place, and in the end kind of died alone in Switzerland, away from Prussia and Germany. Just certain things that happened to all of us, and I thought it was interesting to get out there.
Yeah, I'm thankful that you're doing it. I know it's time consuming, and it's a kind of process that I find, being for more than 2 years active on YouTube, I find myself, I always constantly have to revise my idea of what I'm doing, because you get like an encounter with the reality of the task and the feedback we get. But I hope that you continue, and thank you. I'm thankful that you are, introduced me to Schelling, like show the real motivation for spending time. I got the Schelling reader thanks to you. Looking
Oh,
forward to
awesome.
spending time. Uh, so the
And by the way,
yeah.
if you have any questions about any of the text, please feel, and I say this in all my videos, message me or write a message, or you could DM me on Twitter. I'll respond. I respond to everybody. I respond to everybody's messages, and I try to engage with everybody. So any question, not that I don't think you can handle the material, but if something you're like, oh, well, what, maybe I should ask a question. Please feel free.
Okay, great.
And by the way, I also watched some of your videos too.
Oh.
Like when you messaged me, I right away went to your YouTube channel. I watched 3 or 4, and I was like, wow, fantastic. So what you're doing is great as well too. I
Thanks
really
a lot.
admire it. Yeah.
Thank you. So as maybe as a last question, could you tell us about what you're doing at the moment? I know about the dissertation you're writing. I know that tonight you're doing a live session at 8 p.m. On
Yes.
Twitter Space. So things that we can look forward to, things that you're doing, and both formal academic work, writing, and public social media stuff.
So I'm very active on Twitter, and I like these Twitter Spaces. So tonight I'm talking about. So I'm very pro environment. I'm very pro what's going on with climate, and it doesn't matter. And I will engage with people that are climate deniers as well too. I engage with both the right and the left on my Twitter. I really believe in discoursing with both sides. We should be engaging with everybody, and not just one set of people or everybody. I really believe in that strongly. And so tonight I'm holding at 8 p.m. We're going to be talking about what is nature philosophically and what is Schelling's nature philosophy. This will be my second time that I'm opening a Twitter space. We held one on the freedom essay before, and it went really, really well. So I'll be doing these every Saturday around 7 or 8. You can tune in, you can ask questions, we can talk about what you think about certain things. And tonight we're going to be focusing on the question of nature. As human beings, what's our relation to nature? How can we think organically now about nature as opposed to mechanically? And on the nature vibe, I just completed an essay for a friend of mine named Kalsa Harry. She's another Schellingian. She's put together a special journal called Environment, Space, and Place. Well, that's the journal, but a special edition on Schelling. And along with Jason Wirth and Christopher Satoor, Charlotte Alderwick, I'm missing someone, and myself, we're putting papers forward about Schelling's relation to nature, and I have a paper in that. And in the future, I'm writing for Bloomsbury's Encyclopedia of Visual Arts. I'm writing on Kant and the aesthetic, so Kant's relation to both nature and art and the sublime. And I'm trying to finish my dissertation. And also one more thing, in May 24th to 26th, the North American Schelling Society is having their Schelling conference in Toronto, both at York University and at U of T. I'm presenting a paper there as well. But if anybody's interested in Schelling, there'll be all the experts will be there. People should come and watch some of the panels. It'll be really interesting, actually. So that's pretty much what I'm doing.
Is it a physical conference, physically held in Toronto?
Yes.
Oh,
right
wow.
now it's good. Yeah. So I believe the first 2 days will be held at York University, and the third day will be held at U of T. And I'll keep you updated if you'd like to come. You can.
Sure. It'll be
really fun, actually.
Yeah, that'll be great. We can have coffee too between talks.
Yeah, we can definitely have coffee. Yes.
Thank you so much, Christopher. Hopefully this will be
thank you very
the
much.
first of many conversations we have, both private and public.
Okay, sure. Thank you so much for having me, and all the best.
Pleasure is mine.